It is a great pleasure to see so many of you here, especially our board member Kristen Pyle and her husband Caleb Whitney have put no end of work into this project, as I think you can see around the room and with the tours that you've had and so forth. So I'm really thrilled to see so many of you here in this gorgeous setting. I like downtown Bailey's Harbor too, but this is really great. This is our third event of the summer, and I'm afraid I have to cover just a little bit of Historical Society business before we start the actual slideshow. Oh,
Microphone.
Talk louder.
Can't hear you back here. Microphone.
Should I hold it, Laddie?
You want to give her one of the PA house mics?
Usually the complaint is that I'm too loud.
This will really get you loud here, so.
Let me add that. Thank you. Is that much better? Great, great. We have every August our nomination meeting for the members of the board of directors whose positions expire at the end of this year. And being nominated this summer are Susie Baldry, who is the person there in the parka, Roy Cole, and Nancy Raffle, who I don't see, which kind of surprises me. They are our nominees for those positions. Are there any other nominees from the floor?
Please. Please. Any nominations from the floor?
I have to ask one more time, are there any nominations from the floor? Okay, if
I would run.
you would like to be nominated?
Yes.
Okay, we even have an extra slot. That's wonderful, Howard, I appreciate it. So our nominees are there any others? Our nominees are Howard Williamson, Susie Baldry, Roy Cole, and Nancy Raffle. If you're a member of the Bailey's Harbor Historical Society, would you signify your approval by saying aye? Aye. Are there any nays? Then that will be our slate. And in the last event in September, we will have the final vote. And I'm just checking. I usually have a thing to put my notes on, and I don't here, so I have to look hard. A couple of other little business things. Susie has our sign-in sheets. They're on clipboards, and she'll start one on either side of the room. Would you please sign your name and whatever contact information you care to share? A lot of you, we have your contact information 50 times already, so don't you worry. But if you'd like us to have it, put it on the right-hand side. We need to have a record of who attends our events. If we apply for grants of money or other benefits, generally they like to know that you actually are out there doing something as opposed to just sitting around writing grants. Another little tradition that we have is we usually pass the hat around during the program. And Unfortunately, some unknown person forgot the hats today. So, well, actually, we will pass the basket. Brilliant, Susie. Well, and you could pass the bag on the other side.
We were gonna pass this, but this is gonna be one of our prizes at our drawing, which I'm hoping everybody buys at least one ticket tonight before they leave. But we didn't want to take any chance that there was some brownie fingered using the basket.
Excellent. So that'll be wending its way also during the
You wanna tell them what it's for,
program.
the basket?
Well, the basket is just, it's for money that supports our programs. We're working on archiving collections that we have, and I was just in the archiving catalog yesterday. You just wouldn't believe it. Just to keep our postcards or photographs, in a pristine condition. They need to be put in sleeves and they need to be protected, and every one of those little items is just more expensive than you'd believe. We also have the raffle of our community quilt going on tonight. It's a beautiful quilt on display over here. The product of many quilting sessions on the weekends this past winter. And I understand it was so much fun for the quilters that they're champing at the bit to start the next quilt. So we'll probably have another one next year. The tickets are $5 a ticket, $10 for 3, and $7 for $20. I think the dimensions are about 60 by 80. Is that approximately? I think that's approximately correct. Other prizes include the table runner, the bag, the adorable pillow, and the jeweled quilt square. So enough of all that now. We'll get down to business with Bjorklunden. I have to say thank you up front to Mark Breseman and the people at Bjorklunden. They have been so forthcoming with information, with artifacts, with making us welcome, and allowing us to have our meeting here in this beautiful space. Mark, it was great of you to do. Mark will be doing our program tonight, and he has slide number 1 up here. I'll turn the mic over to him in just a moment. Afterwards, if you have stories to share or questions to ask, I know there are a lot of people here who are descendants of or related to Bjorklunden personnel from way back when. And those are the kinds of stories, that we just love to hear. We love to hear the local connection to Bjorklunden, which is now, what is it? What would you call it? Is it a branch campus or a?
It's the northern campus.
The northern campus of Lawrence University. So Mark, let me give this to you, unless you have your own.
Just turn that one off, Leah, if you can, please.
I can.
That one's off. Is this other one on?
Well, mine is.
Can you hear me, though, through the microphone? We might have to move that up a little bit. Is that any better? Should I walk around like this? All right, I'm very excited to be here tonight. I am Mark Breseman, and I'm the Associate Vice President for the Alumni and Constituency Engagement Office at Lawrence University. We'll practice that later. But part of my duties still involve Bjorklunden. And this is where I started my job for Lawrence back in 1997. But enough about me. You're here for Bjorklunden history tonight. I'm going to give it to you from my perspective. So you'll get a little bit of my story interweaved with the whole story that I've been able to put together over the years that I've been associated with Bjorklunden. And then at the end, as Leanne mentioned, we'll share some stories, because I'm always excited about learning from you and other things that are going on in the room. But for now, as soon as Christy pushes that button, we're going to go back in time to 1928. And we're going to walk through that gate. And am I in your way if I stand here? This works all right? Okay, so we're going back to 1928. This is the Chapel Lane Gate. At that time, of course, it was called Muckian Road. But Carlton Vale, he was an insurance underwriter from Highland Park, Illinois, was looking for a place to build his summer home. And he and his wife, Winifred, found this property. They found 330 acres over a mile of Lake Michigan shoreline, and they paid $2,000 for the whole thing. Now, what do you get for that? About this much or something? I don't know what you get for $2,000. But anyway, so they bought that, and Winifred immediately gave it the name Bjorklunden vid sjön, which is Swedish for Birch Forest by the water. This was a shoreline back in the day. They had all these birch trees that were still on the shoreline. So that was the name that Winifred gave it. They began building their summer home in 1929. Frank Oldenburg was the builder on this, and it was always just a summer home. They never spent winters here. And here's a shot of it. If anybody were wandering around today, you can see that this tree is a little bit bigger now, and so are all these. But this was taken before the servants' wing was added to the main lodge. The studio is still there, but this is an older shot before the servants' wing was added. And this is how the house looked for many years. I'm sure many of you in this room have seen that house. And this is the quintessential shot. Actually, Roy Lucas took this shot back in the early 60s. But this is pretty much how the house looked for many years. This would be the lakeside part of that. This slide was taken in the early 1980s. So an interior view of the house. So some of you probably never got into that house, but we're going to see a lot of Winifred's artwork. Winifred was a self-taught artist, and anywhere there was basically any sort of spare wall space, she would put oil to canvas and put up a piece of artwork. And it would either be some interpretation of a Bible story or some Scandinavian myth that she would put into artwork. And so these are going to be all over the house. Now there is one exception to that artwork and Bible study rule, and that's this one. This mural was painted up in the bunk room upstairs, and that is Winifred's drawing of her son Carl's wedding in 1950. I don't know if anybody was here for that wedding, but 1950, Carl and Andre got married, and it was a big Swedish event. Lots of fun things happened on that day in 1950. She also did a lot of Swedish folk art that she painted throughout the bedrooms that were in the house. And this was back in the servants' wing, and this was on the bench that was on the little eating table that was there in the maids' quarters. So here's the spot. This one was situated as you went down the stairs from the loft down the stairs. And this is her interpretation of the Elijah story. Now, where he ascends into heaven. I'm not sure how factual this is because she put him in a Norwegian sleigh going over their house. Not sure if that's actually how it all happened, but you can see that she did this in 1938. So, and this is another Bible story that she took a little bit of liberty with. This was all across the loft on the second story. It had to be a 20-foot mural. And this is her interpretation of the creation story. So all the different days, she would have the different things of creation. And of course, the creation story ends with Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the garden because they were bad. In Winifred's version, it's Winifred and her husband leaving Bjorklunden, not because they're bad, it's because it's October and they got to go home because it's too cold. So that's why she is shedding a little tear in this painting, because she has to leave her beloved Bjorklunden for the winter. Speaking of winter, so we have the studio, little two-bedroom guest cottage, and this is where Winifred did much of her painting and carving. This natural light skylight let in lots of light for her to do her work in the sitting room of that studio. And we were lucky enough about 8 years ago to get a gift to turn that studio into a year-round facility. And we were able to upgrade it and update it, and it has really worked out wonderfully well. But you can see that it has maintained the character of the old place. with the corner fireplace, and the ceiling is still, has all of her paintings on it and so forth. And even the corner cupboard there that she painted, and this old trunk that she painted. So it's all still there in the studio. And this, for some of you that might have been in the caretaker's house, this was part of that Swedish bed on the first floor in what used to be the bedroom and living room combined. And one of the earlier resident directors took that out of there. But we put this back together and put it in the studio. So that is where it is living now. This is the garage as it was being constructed. And this is pretty much how it looks today. So if any of you want to come out here and volunteer and do any kind of lawn cutting, tree trimming, go right into this door right here. That's where all the tools are. So feel free to help yourself and come out and clear some trails whenever you want. And this is the Stabur that was built in the early 30s. And it was built as the only year-round house on the property. And it was the only year-round building that was there. And the Stabur, of course, is often found in Scandinavian countries, agricultural settings, where the top is bigger than the bottom. And that's where animals would often live downstairs, and then the people would be upstairs. When my wife and I were there, we were upstairs, the kids were downstairs. It all worked out. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Anyway, things did change when I got up here in '97 with the job. Lawrence did recognize the fact that we did have a couple kids, even though I know many of you in the room that saw the place in the back in the day. There were plenty of kids running around there, but our kids needed to be separated. So Lawrence agreed to add on to the Stabur, and that's when this was done in 1998. And this is where I was lucky enough to live from '97 until 2012. We raised our kids here. It was a fabulous place to be able to do that. So we were very fortunate. So this is the workshop that was built in 1947, and it was built to house all of the great tools. Some of you are wandering around tonight in the back of the old garage now is where we have the tools, and this is now currently used as Dorr Shakespeare's dressing room and storage area. So if you've seen Dorr Shakespeare, this is sort of their home base for this stuff when they're actually performing here. So now we're going to change one of the main characters. So in 1932, Carlton Ville was driving up here from Highland Park, and he was just south of Institute, and he got in a car accident. He got thrown from the car, skull fracture, and he died. That was in 1932. At that time, the Vales and Boyntons were good family friends. This guy, Donald Boynton, lost his first wife to pneumonia in 1929. And so after Carlton died, then then Winifred and Donald Boynton got together. Donald Boynton his family owned a large shipping and mining conglomerate that was based at that time on Michigan Avenue down in Chicago. So they were family friends, they joined their families, and they got married in 1934. But before that, after Carlton died, Winifred spent about 9 months in Europe. And one of the places that she visited was Lillehammer, Norway, and saw this stavkirke. And some of you probably have seen this live also. And it inspired her so much that she said, I want one on my property. The kids thought she was nuts to think about building a chapel. There's a mighty fine church right in town, Ma. What are you thinking about? But she was insistent that she wanted a stave church on the property. So finally in 1939, the chapel was built. It was her design, patterned after that one in Norway, but it was her design. And the builders of that, Henquinet, Nels, and Milt were really helped to put that building up. So it took one summer to build the outside, build the building itself. And then 8 more years were spent on the inside with all of the painting, all of the carvings. And I know that if you haven't already, you can certainly, after we're through here, you can go back and Jane Whitney will give you a more complete tour. But I want to just wet your whistle in case you're not going to see it, that all of these paintings, there's 41 different murals in there. Winifred did them all herself. It's a casein style paint, just like Michelangelo used. And the only difference is Michelangelo painted his on wet plaster, Winifred painted hers on dry plaster. And she used obviously some more muted pastel type colors. But it looks the same now as it did when she painted it back in the early 40s. So she is also responsible for the carvings. And she wasn't a professional carver at that either. She learned how to carve from a local high school, and she and her husband Donald were the carvers. And they carved all of this stuff. This is one of the first murals that she did, the Prince of Peace mural. And this is her pride and joy. This baptismal font took them 656 hours to carve. Carved in Wisconsin white oak, and there are the 12 disciples are all depicted on here. And she showed them doing the jobs they did before they were called to be disciples. And so she researched all that, and she would carve all these. But the way they would carve together as a team, Winifred was a go-getter. She needed to get things done and move on. And she didn't have a lot of patience, so she would start the thing, and then Donald would come along and finish it. And she did admit in her book that there were a couple times where she actually chopped off a head mistakenly. And Donald repaired it, and you cannot tell which one that was done. Donald was also a master at this carving. So the baptismal font is their pride and joy. This is a shot, I believe it was taken around 1953 to commemorate her book. After she had that published, she had 5,000 copies of the original book published by Reinhardt. So if you have an original one by Reinhardt, that's worth something. And she signed quite a few of those. So that's really something else. We have since reprinted them on Lawrence University's press. But wait a minute, how'd that get in there? That's the one I wanted to show you. So the Boyntons were very proud of that chapel, and they would dress up and give tours on Mondays and Wednesdays. They'd have Vesper services in there on Sunday afternoon, so the local community could really get a chance to use that. But Winifred also had an interest in gardening. I think many of you people in the room know of Hedwig's role in this whole thing. And so Winifred, besides being a concert-level pianist, a painter, a carver, actually an author, she also had an interest in gardening. I don't think she ever slept, but some of you can talk about that. And this was the garden back in the early days. And you can see even the tennis court in the back. And that was actually a very big source of pride for them, because it was one of the only hard surface tennis courts in Door County at the time. And in fact, talking to Donald's daughter, Suzanne, she commented oftentimes about the tennis parties they would have, and when Basil Rathbone's son and daughter-in-law were over at Peninsula Players, they would come over here and play tennis. So it was a very fun place to be. And you can see they like dressing up like that on occasion. You can try one of these on if you want to dress up yourself. There's one over there by the door. But anyway, you'll see as we go through here that there are a number of these little Tomten. And Winifred carved those. And they are happy little trolls. So they're not the grumpy trolls. These are happy Tomten. And she actually carved each one after a friend of hers. So imagine how proud you'd be if this was you. Not sure what his job was, but she had someone else, and I don't know where the slide went. There was someone else that she had actually running across the gate. And that was a friend of hers, Frank Knox, Secretary of the Navy, and she depicted him on the fence running for office. But by the time Lawrence got here in the early 70s, the Tomten had been stolen long ago, so they're gone. They're not around anymore. But they're very colorful. And this was the garden as it transformed. And this would be probably in the early 60s, I would guess, that this was taken. And again, you can see how colorful those Tomtens are. So the gardens were just a very special place. And when Lawrence acquired the property, it was just grass, and all of the fence had rotted away, and there was really all it was left with is stone. And so we gradually, over the years, have done different things. This is an old slide, but if you haven't been in there recently, Dorr Shakespeare has transformed that garden into a wonderful Shakespeare garden. It is just great, but it still maintains the original stone that Winifred did back in the day. So just giving you some perspective of how this whole thing looked. This would be this was an aerial view in 1977. So here we have the lodge, and here's where the servants' quarters are there. And the studio is right here. There's the garage, workshop, and the caretaker's house is up right over here. And the chapel is right in here. We're in a building right over here. So for many years, the Vail and Boynton kids would come up here on occasion as they could. Winifred's daughter Edith Vail was a music teacher out in New York City, so she would come for summers on occasion. She never married, and she died the same year that Winifred did in 1974. Carlton Vail was her son that got married. We talked about him already. And I actually got to meet him a couple different times, talked to him on the phone, and he died in the late 90s. And they never had any kids either. So the Vail side is now done as far as Bjorklunden is concerned. Here's a picture of Carl and Andre on their wedding day. And these are the Boynton kids. So these are and Donald Boynton had a lumber camp kind of thing up in the UP, and when they got together, they had to give up one or the other, and you can see that Winifred won that one too. So Donald gave that up, and they came here, and all of the kids were all only kid that I knew was Zan. So Suzanne Boynton Myers was her name, and she was fun, full of all great stories. She had a great time up here back in the 40s, believe me, and. She had 3 kids, and 2 of her daughters spent quite a bit of time here. In fact, one of her daughters married a Laurentian. They got married in the chapel. So it kind of completes that. And you can see in the chapel baptism book over there when the Boynton grandchildren were baptized. So how did Lawrence end up with this property? So in the early 60s, Winifred was thinking, what's going to happen to this property after we're gone? And she had every intention of having it kept by some institution to be open forever. That chapel was so important to her, and it was so important that people could see it forever, that it was never her idea to leave it to any of her kids. Actually, her kids were fine with that. So she began investigating what institution, what college might be interested in this. She first offered it to St. Olaf College. That's west of here somewhere, I think. I don't know where that is exactly, but so it's somewhere in the, I don't know. Anyway, and St. Olaf said, we would love it. You bet, we'll take it. And they told the Boyntons they were going to move the chapel to their campus. And that didn't sit well with the Boyntons. So then they turned to their next institution was Northwestern University in Evanston. And Northwestern also loved that idea. So this would be great. It'd be a religious center. We could really put us on the map in the Big Ten. It'd be really great. But they would only take it if there was an endowment of $1 million, which is more than what the Boyntons wanted to leave at that time. But it was Lawrence University's great good fortune that at that time, a VP from Northwestern knew one of Lawrence's trustees and said, hey, this property is only 100 miles from your campus. You might want to talk to Winifred and see what you can work out. At that time, Doug Knight was Lawrence's president, and they started the conversation. And then in '63, after Doug Knight left, Curtis Tarr was the president, actually signed the deal with Winifred. And she left everything to Lawrence upon their deaths in a 1-page handwritten addendum to her will. And boom, everything goes to Lawrence. And we were really excited about that prospect. So we took over. Donald died in 1966. Winifred died in 1974, and that is why that stone is hanging out there. And it was my great good fortune to be a freshman at Lawrence in 1974, 75. So I was the first student hired to work up here in 1975. So I spent all 4 summers of those years in the 70s up here working at Bjorklunden and gathering all kinds of historical knowledge. So Lawrence gets the property. What do we do with it? It took a little bit of meandering and a few false starts and stops, but in 1980, the Summer Seminar Series was began, and it's just the way it is today. That series started back then, and it continues on today. We've expanded it a little bit. It's a little more involved than it once was for various reasons, but we do have, studio is used for art classes and drawing classes. We have lots of naturalists come up and lead classes. I threw this slide in with great hopes that someday our beach will look like this again. And you guys have waterfront, you know the pain we've been going through with our stuff. But thanks to Jane Whitney, we're getting there. Right, Jane? Right. We're getting there. So anyway, someday we'll do that again. And we still give chapel tours. I will put this out there that anytime, Monday or Wednesday during the summer, 1 to 4, the chapel is open for tours. We have our summer staff give those tours. They don't all dress up like this anymore, but they do give tours. And then for many years we did a fish boil on the last night of the seminars. We would do fish boils, and the summer staff would entertain the guests. They're very talented bunch of students from Lawrence University. But now there's another little shift in the story, and this is 1993, an August Saturday night. Some of you might have heard some fire trucks going by. So there was a fire in the ceiling of the kitchen. We think it was an electrical fire, and it destroyed the lodge beyond anything that was useful. And so now Lawrence was faced with a very tough decision. We couldn't use the lodge. This property had always cost the college money. It never really helped the academic program much because it was a seasonal building. Lawrence was a trimester thing, and so it was only open like a couple of months when Lawrence was even in session. So there was a lot of discussion as to what to do. And finally, in 1995, the president of Lawrence at the time, Rick Warsh, said, okay, rather than just having this thing closed up all winter, let's think outside the box and build a bigger building, a little bit away from everything else, and have students and faculty come up every weekend. And so in June of '96, the first half of this building was built, and the student seminar program began at that point. Now, again, you can see all this. One thing you'll notice today, if you do walk down that way, and I encourage you to do so, there are lots of students here. Right now we have the men's and women's cross-country team and men's and women's soccer teams here. So you'll see a lot of kids, students running around that are in pretty good shape. So anyway, this is how it looks today, so there's no reason to dwell too much on this, but it's definitely worth going down there. And you can see that we did do a little bit of copying of Winifred's paintings, and we had them put up. So anything you see, some of the frame stuff, anything that's around there that looks old, was saved from the old lodge. We were lucky that the bedroom doors were closed, so there was no smoke damage to some of these paintings. In the front bedrooms, obviously that back bedroom, the bedroom that was above the kitchen was where the mural was for Carl and Andre's wedding, and that room was totally destroyed. But one picture I didn't show you, and you can actually still see this table, but that bunk room, they called it, where the mural was, burned up, totally black, all the way around. There's a photograph of a table that Winifred made and painted, a little red table with 3 red chairs. It was sitting in the middle of that room, right above where the fire started, not touched. And that table is still upstairs in a little library nook right across from the elevator. So it's like, whoa. So Winifred had a lot of power, so just so you know that. Okay, so we got the dining room, and then in the bedrooms, I think they're probably all going to be filled with students, but we have bedrooms with bathrooms in each one. So you need to know that when Leanne talked about where I worked, what I was doing, so this is called the Northern Campus. We have a Southern Campus in Appleton, which is actually a little bit bigger than this one. And the chapel's a little bit bigger too. But we do academic things in both places, and we do have chapels on both campuses. And some of the things we get to do with these students, they'll come up here they'll get here around 8 o'clock on Friday night and leave at 3 o'clock on Sunday. In the meantime, they can do things that they can't accomplish on campus. They can work together with different departments. They can get a lot of different things that go on. This actually is an example of the Model United Nations, where the students come up on a Friday night. They get broken up into different countries, given a world problem to solve, and by Sunday afternoon, they've solved that problem. If only it was that simple, huh? We can do archaeological digs just off the south end of the property here. There's remnants, there's artifacts from Native American tribes from long ago. The art department loves coming up here and doing things. And I assume that there have been many of you in the room that have taken advantage of our Sunday afternoon concerts. Whenever the conservatory is up here, they will put a free concert on Sunday afternoons, generally at 1:30. And I would say of the 10 weeks during a term, 4 to 5 of those weeks, there's a free concert on Sunday afternoon. And if you want to learn more about those, we'd send it out by email, and Kim would do that. You can either give me an email address tonight, or we can take care of that and put you on our mailing list for our concerts. Now, who recognizes this? I don't know, it happened right out in front of Bjorklunden. I found this slide, and what I talk about is that this actually was the first way that Lawrence was thinking about bringing up their students. But it didn't really pan out, so we had to forget about the plane. But I don't know if anybody ever saw that, but that was an amazing thing. And the seminars are still going on today. Not all of them include that much wine, but we do have some wine. Some wine seminars. We bring in instructors from all over the place, all over the globe actually. Terry Moran is flying in from Iraq. He's an ABC Chief Foreign Correspondent. He's teaching here next week. He was on TV, I believe, on Monday in Iraq. He'll be here talking about some of the issues that he's covered in the past year. This guy, Jonathan Greenwald, is the second in command of International Crisis Center. He was in Brussels for many years. Now he's back in D.C. But he's coming the first week in September, and he's talking about what's going on in Iran. That is his forte right there. So we try to get topical seminars here. All right, here's an overview. This is 1996 when this slide was taken. So here's where the old lodge, the old house was there. Chapel is here. So we're somewhere around in here, but this is before this part of the building was built. There's a parking lot, and you can see here where the tennis court was. This is where Shakespeare is now. And there's the garden. The caretaker's house is out this way, and then the road out to the highway is this way. So who would have thought, so the place was built in 1996, by 2002 it was too small. There were waiting lists for students, waiting lists for the seminars, and lots of local groups couldn't get in because we were too full and too busy. So we started a campaign, a $4 million expansion campaign to more than double the place in size. So this is the old line right here, and this is the new part on the first floor. Here we are in this room. And then the second floor goes that way. And this kind of gets tucked back in the woods, so you might not even notice how big this is, but this goes back there a little ways. So this is what is making us much more efficient today in our usage. I'm just going to quickly show you the way it is. You don't have to walk around there tonight. But this is the new wing that heads off to the south. I guess I have to get new batteries for this thing. And we tried to duplicate the decks, and this is off of the, here's the entryway we just came in tonight. Here we are tonight. 2 weeks ago we had the Jazz Fantasy Camp. Maybe some of you were here for that. We do that every year, which is fabulous music here in this room. We also have other seminars. We have theater productions. Last December we had a couple of theater productions in here. That's a lakeside seminar room. Students can do research project with the mudroom. You've seen the catering kitchen right here. Bedrooms are all the same. And the staff lives right here in this building. So we put all the 10 student staff members together here. The conservatory is up. We give them practice rooms. And then we fought this for a long time, but we admit that there's now a need for computers and Wi-Fi. So the whole lodge is Wi-Fi, but we still have real big cell phone issues here. So if you ever come here for a seminar, don't plan on getting on your cell phone right away. And we have the observation deck that looks out over the trees. And a few years ago, we had a couple come for the seminar. I mean, the way they travel is the man, the guy, he has a little plane, and he'll fly his plane to wherever they're going, and his wife then follows behind in her camper and drives. It's like, huh? But so he was here a little while before she was, because they live in Alaska. So he got here first, and I encouraged him to fly around and take some aerial photographs. So this, obviously, you recognize all this, Ann Clam, and here's the marina at Nelson's. As we're looking north, here's, depending what you call, either Mud Bay or Moonlight Bay. And then there's Rowley's Bay up there. And then the Cane Island Lighthouse is right there. But this is what it looks like for us. This would be about probably 6 years ago. So here it is done. All of the dark trees, this is all Bjorklunden. And this, of course, recognizes Maxwell and Braes. And here, look at that beach now, huh? Ooh, good thing Jane came along. Anyway, so we're in this room right here. And you can see how much it's grown in since the last shot that we took just in '96. This is where Door Shakespeare is. Of course, now we have our nice fancy road that is there. Years ago, if anybody walked this property, there were eagles' nests on this property. And Winifred refers to that in her book about how much they enjoyed having the eagles on this property. And so it's fun to see eagles back in Door County again. And if anybody was here, and it must have been in the late 40s or 50s, I wish I had a better shot of this, but this was a birdhouse. And that birdhouse was an exact replica of their house. So the Purple Martins had a house just like theirs to live in. This is not part of Bjorklunden, by the way. I put a couple of these in just to remind myself to tell you that Bjorklunden does lots of trips. And in connection with Lawrence University. In fact, there are some of these people in this that you might recognize that actually go on these trips with us. This was a trip to Italy, and this was the Duomo and the Campanile, and that is right where we were staying in a hotel. Anyway, we do lots of these trips all over the world. We're going back to Italy next April to go to Milan, Venice, and some northern lakes. But you know, wherever we go in the world, we always see dragons. When I see these dragons, I think, you know, think about Bjorklunden. I think of all the dragons that Winifred had carved back here at the chapel, at all the buildings and stuff, and it always reminds me of home. So here we are back at Bjorklunden with Winifred to thank for all the things that we have together. So we appreciate all of her talents, and I do hope that whenever you see the sign, your friends see the sign, that you turn in and you come and visit us. So that is it. Thank you very much. So let's do this. First of all, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I love the fact that you're all here. How many of you are here in this building for the first time? All right. How many of you are here for the last time in this building? All right, I didn't see any hands. That's great. So I want you to feel welcome to come back here. This is open. I mean, we're always here. We're always doing something. There's always something exciting going on. There might be a wedding here. I would discourage you from actually joining in on the wedding. But you'd be welcome to walk the trails, pick up maps, call ahead, show some friends at chapel. It really is something we want to share with the local community. We're proud of the fact that we're here in Bailey's Harbor, and we have this shared history that is really great. So please come back and bring friends and family as often as you want. Now we can ask some specific questions, and then we can also share some stories. And then if you want to still, Jane will take us over to the chapel. So any questions? Go ahead, yes.
I work at the Visitor Center, and people continually want to tour the chapel, and they don't always come on a Monday afternoon and a Wednesday. Is there any possibilities that that's going to be expanded?
Expanding it probably isn't in the cards, just because even the days that we do have open, half the time the students are just sitting there. However, I will say this, that if anybody wants to come out, we can always give them the key and they can go look at the chapel on their own. Don't tell anybody that. Cut that out of this thing. But you can.
We get a number, and Mary's here too, and I know, we get a number of people, and then we tell them, well, it's Wednesday or Monday, and it's Tuesday, and they're going home.
Right. If they want an official tour, that's when it is.
Yeah.
If they want to come out and see it, they're welcome to come out. And all you have to do is ask Kim, Sam, myself.
Somebody just come to the main office.
You bet. You bet.
That's great, that's very generous. Thank
Right.
you. I just-
Well, it's something that shouldn't be hidden. I mean, Winifred wanted this to be seen, and that's what we want to do. So, absolutely. Yes.
What's the estimated value of this 425 acres now? Do you have any idea?
Okay, so we did expand from our 330 to 425. We had to put that road in to keep our Max Holton Braes neighbors happy and our Chapel Lane neighbors happy. So we had to put this road in and buy 80 acres and do all this stuff, which it works out perfectly. I guess the value would fluctuate. A couple years ago, my brother is a math guy, actuary guy, and we walked the entire shoreline. And just for fun, we figured, okay, how much did we just walk on? At the time, this was before 2008. At the time, we figured it was over $19 million if you just took the shoreline itself. Right. Are you interested in making a purchase? I mean, we could. No, Lawrence is.
House up north.
That's where you go. So no, we're happy to have this much, and the shoreline has never changed in all the years. It's been that same way all the time. Yes, Bill.
Mark, tell us about the wind turbine.
So if you noticed, either looking on 57 or coming down our road, there we have a wind turbine that actually was started by a student, a senior experience project for a student at Lawrence, who wanted to research what it could save Bjorklunden in energy costs to put up a wind turbine. So he did a lot of research on how much we were currently spending, how much the kilowatts were, and what we could do in different directions. And through his research, it inspired a number of folks that, yeah, this is worth it. And then we did a little mini fundraising campaign to raise the money to do it. In fact, we got in, the deadline for this grants with the energy program was like a midnight on some October date. We got it in at like 11:59. So we were the last grant in the door to get $200,000 from the WPS fund. So we were able to get that, plus we matched it with other funds, and so we put that wind turbine up at no cost to us. And so everything that we do, we save, it's about $10,000 a year we save in electrical costs for the wind turbine.
Mark, would you ask how many people here tonight have had family or know someone who works?
Okay, that's our next thing. Okay, so I'm really curious to know how many actually worked here. How many did some fun things while you were here? So we have some. And what was your role?
I was their last maid.
Fabulous. Did you live in, or did you come back and?
Well, my family's home was right through the woods to the west, so it was, when I wanted to go home, I would just walk through the woods.
And tell us who you are.
I'm Nancy Barnowski.
Very good. And that was, what years would that have been in Nancy?
That would have been 1963. It was my first real job in York County. I was 13. Before that, I picked cherries, all kids did. And I worked for that whole year with them. Sometimes I stayed in the maids' quarters. I always, every Wednesday late morning, I would do the flowers for the chapel. One thing I remember about the Boyntons that I tell people it was very endearing is I think it was every Thursday, it might have been Wednesday, but I think it was Thursday, they would go to the theater in the garden, and at dinner time they would dress to the nines, just beautiful gown and furs and very dressed out. And they always had a large candelabra at the end of their table, and after dinner, and before going to the theater, they would stand up, hold hands, and blow out the candles.
Anybody else have any stories they'd like to share, personal experiences here? How about people that had relatives that worked here? I think this is fabulous that there's still some history here. Any stories that you remember that you want to relate?
I would like to share one. I don't know if you remember me, Mark. We met. You showed me the caretaker's house.
Yeah.
I was actually born here.
So tell us who you are and the history
My
about
name
it.
is Faye Blue, but it was Faye Fleschel. My father, Pete Fleschel, was the caretaker of Bjorklunden before the Higginets.
Can you talk a little louder?
Yeah, I want to. I'll try to. But anyway, I only lived here a year, so I don't remember it, but I've heard some stories. And my father was actually here from 1930 to 1942 as caretaker. In the book, Faith Builds a Chapel, he's only mentioned on page 5 as a caretaker. There was, before the chapel was, I think he was here just when it started. And Mrs. Boynton, I should start, let me go back a little bit. When my mom and dad, Martha and Pete Bleschel, first became caretakers, they had 2 boys, Richard and Russell. And shortly after they moved here, Alan was born. And then it was 9.5 years before I was born in 1940. And during that year, my mother became pregnant with my younger brother. And we always called her Mrs. Boynton, even my folks. And she was always referred to as Mrs. Boynton in our home. And she came to my father and said that she did not want a caretaker that continued to have children. And I don't know if there was much choice. Well, there probably was a choice, but it wasn't the right one. And so my father, according to my brother, took it to mean that he was either fired or she wanted him gone. So, but my brother said that he thought it was because my father always wanted to be a farmer and took this as an excuse. So my oldest brother, being 14 at the time, he said he cried like a baby because he did not want to leave here. And they then moved to Egg Harbor to a dirt farm where this, as you know, the caretaker's house had all the amenities. And my brother was born there. And from there, my father became a farmer and a Watkins salesman. And some of the people in this room may remember him as a Watkins salesman, but that story goes around our family. My father was also peeved that Mrs. Boynton did not give him a copy of the book.
You can have as many as you want.
I think my mother probably found it later and bought it. I don't know. It's rather old, so maybe they may have purchased it. That was not my father's choice to buy it. Maybe you got stories too? Because Glenn and I share a grandmother.
And Susie.
And Susie.
Our grandmother was Hedwig, and she was the gardener here. And my grandmother lived with all us, my mother and my brother and myself, all the years I was growing up. And Mrs. Boynton would come to the house, because we didn't have a car, and she would come to the house and she'd pick Grandma up every morning faithfully at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And then a lot of times, Grandma would take me along, and Mrs. Boynton had a cart, and I don't know, Mark, is the cart still here that?
Parts of it.
Parts of it, huh? Okay. She had this huge cart, and I was very little, maybe like 6, 7 years old, and my grandmother would pull me around the grounds here in this cart, and I was always told not to pick the flowers because that was something I loved to do. But she loved working for Mrs. Boynton. She, it was a big part of her life, these gardens, and I just have really good memories of this place, and to see how it's come so far, and it means so much to many more people now. So anyway, I have great memories.
I have a memory, it's not an old one. My husband was a carpenter, and one morning Joe Hoffensberger, who was probably the first director after Lawrence flooded, called my husband at 6 o'clock in the morning. We didn't know the man, and he just said, "Gene, I heard you're a carpenter." "Yeah." "Well, we got a problem, the floor. We went through the floor in the kitchen, and we've got a party coming in tonight. Can you fix it for us?" And Gene said, "Well, I got some other jobs, but I'll come down and look at it." So he went down and looked at it. Needless to say, it was just a crawl space. And Gene said, "Well, we can do it, but I'm going to need a helper." So Joe changed his clothes, and between the two of them, by late afternoon, they had reinforced the floor temporarily, so that night they could serve and entertain. And so it's not an old memory, but it was quite. And so after all those years, or after that, Joe and his wife had become very dear and close friends, and so it's one of those little. And one of the things that Joe mentioned was that the community was so involved in maintaining this place and being a part of it, and that continued even when it was taken over by some outsiders. So that was always the thing, outsiders, but there was always that feeling that community really, really wanted this place to continue and be the jewel of our town, as it has been and continues to be. So our thanks go from us who have lived here our whole lives to Lawrence to have done such a beautiful job of maintaining such an awesome thing. How many small communities like ours have the ability to have this type of people coming into our community and who genuinely care and have made such an effort to maintain what is such a gift. So thank you.
My grandmother was the Boynton's cook. And I don't know for how many years she was a cook, I just don't know. I remember coming up here in the 50s. Grandma had every Thursday off, so we would meet her at Bunda's in Sister Bay, if any of you remember Bunda's. And she had her hair done, and then she'd spend the day with us in Ellison Bay. I'm a Newman, we're from Ellison Bay, and no longer live there. We're in California now, but I come back whenever I can. But Grandma would spend Thursday with us, and then Mom would load us all in the car, and we'd bring her back in the evening. And I would see Donald Boynton a lot with his dog. He had like a Rin Tin Tin dog, and its name was Bjork. And he had it on a leash all the time, but we could pet Bjork, and that was a big deal. And Don was always out in that garage, and the doors were open, and he was doing some kind of woodworking out there. And then Grandma also had Sunday afternoon off, so again, Mom would put everybody in the car, and we'd come up here. But we got to walk everywhere, and Grandma was one of the servants, so she was in the servants part of Bjorklunden, and she took care of since she was the cook, it was a long, narrow kitchen, and then next to that was her little dining room. It was very small. The colors were wonderful, and then next to that she had a very small bedroom with a single bed, and she would come from California in April and stay with us in Ellison Bay, and come to work here in May and stay until the end of October, get on the Greyhound again and go out to California, where she would stay with 2 of her sons and with a daughter. So she didn't have a home of her own. She was from Jacksonport, Desjardins, and a French Canadian. But anyway, she would stay with her kids, and then ended up in California again, staying with kids. So she would meet with Winifred one evening or morning, I'm not sure, a week, and Winifred would tell her what she wanted to eat. This meal, that meal, that. I don't know who did the shopping, but then Grandma did all the cooking. So it was just a treat to be able to come up here as a kid and run around. I've been in the chapel many times, and even after she had retired, I would come in and peek in her bedroom window or look in the kitchen. It was just so much fun to see where Grandma had been.
What was her name?
And her name. Tell us her name, please.
I'm Ruth Newman. I'm from Ellison Bay.
And your grandma's name is?
Eva. Eva Elaine Desjardins. And Hugenroth. She married a German from Sister Bay.
Any other connections? Any other stories? Any other questions?
Yes, my dad was Nelson.
That's right. You got to talk into this, though. Tell us who you are and who your dad was.
My name is Barb Henquinette Craigie. My Uncle Milt was the caretaker for many years. We spent every Thanksgiving in that house. And my dad was Nels Henquinette, who helped build the chapel. And he also built a replica of it from the original lumber, and it's at the Sturgeon Bay Museum. My 3 sisters were all maids here in the 40s. I was too young, I missed that. But we would have the best time coming to Aunt Helen's and staying in that beautiful house, and I'd help her hang up the laundry because she did all the laundry for the Boyntons, and she had a mangle in her living room, and she did all the sheets and pillowcases and tablecloths and napkins, and it was an adventure. Thank you.
How many servants were there?
I have no idea, I was too young.
I think it varied. I know that in Highland Park they had a chauffeur, and he'd be back and forth, coming back and forth here. But as far as the local folks, you would know much better than. And I know there were 2 bedrooms, and when I was working in here, that servants' quarters was where I was stationed, and I used that same bedroom that your grandmother used. That was my headquarters, and they for some reason, Lawrence didn't think it was worthy of me being in the kitchen of the rest of the house. This is back in 1975, where they were, what are we going to do with this place? So I couldn't use the rest of the house. That was off limits. So The sitting room had that beautiful bench that we saw and a nice table and a little fireplace, but no kitchen. So I was able to have a little hot plate, and then I got to do my dishes in the bathroom, in the tub, and stuff like that. So it was very exciting. But the best part was it was all mine. Very few people even came up to that place. So imagine a college kid for 2 summers having that house to himself. It was like, whoa, what happened here? Yes, Lynn.
Our 2 children were married in the chapel, and then our grandchildren were baptized there. Do they still do weddings in the chapel?
Yes, we still do weddings and baptisms. Yes, absolutely. But you have to, obviously a little smaller, in the smaller size weddings. But yes, we still do that, maybe 20 a year or so. We still do that.
So Mark, 2 questions. Were you in on the planning on how what was going to happen here? And in that planning, because it's so obviously that the place is open to everybody because of the Boytons, was that and is it still present with Lawrence University to make sure that it is always open to everyone?
Mm-hmm. There's nothing in the will, there's nothing that ties us legally to do anything here that we don't want to do. However, from the very beginning, we have taken the spirit of what Winifred wanted this place to be and have followed that. I think we've done a respectable job of that. I personally was not involved in anything to do with the fire or the building of the first lodge. I was luckily enough, I didn't get hired until early 1997, so I missed all that drama, and thankfully so, because I didn't need to be a part of that. So I was here for the expansion and the other stuff, but not for the initial things. The discussion on campus, as I alluded to before, it was a big deal to figure out what to do with this place. I mean, how many small liberal arts colleges have 400, or at the time 300 and some acres in a resort area? How do they explain that to the trustees? Well, so we had to really figure out a way to tie it back into campus, and that was Rick Warsher's vision, that we can make this an academic extension of the campus and do something meaningful with the property. At the same time, then we also had to make sure that it would pay for itself. And so the big part of what my job was then and continues to be now is to make sure that Bjorklunden is budget neutral. And so we do that through fundraising, the Boynton Society. We do a lot of things to make ends meet up here. We have our own separate budget. We're separate from the college in that regard, but we do make it work so that we're not a burden on the college by any means. I'll just tell, go ahead.
What kind of staff do you have to keep this going? I'm not talking about presenters or musicians. I'm talking about the nitty-gritty.
The staff. I'll tell you this. So when I got here in 1997, I was the only full-time person. Our chef was 32 hours a week, and we had a half-time custodial person. And that was interesting for a couple years. So we've expanded now, and really after the addition, what we have now is I'm still sort of hanging around here, but we have an assistant director that runs the seminar program, our office coordinator in that office there, really does everything else, all the scheduling, everything that needs to be done in that regard. We just hired this past April a maintenance person, so for the first time in the history of Bjorklunden, there was actually someone to take care of the place. So it was year-round, yes. Mark Franke, maybe some of you know Mark. So he's our new go-to guy. And then our chef is full-time, and then we have a part-time assistant that works on the weekends to take care of the weekend program when they're here with the students. So we're not overstaffed, but we do get things done. Are you doing okay, or you want to just keep going, or okay, go ahead.
It sounds like you're trying to restore the shoreline. How are you doing that?
Well, I should have Jane Whitney give a big speech here, but basically the issue is, water is quite low. Right? That results in all the phragmites that has come in, and that's a huge issue with that. But with diligence of Jane and some little bit of spray, we have taken care of the phragmites issue pretty much. Cladophyra, you really can't do much with the cladophyra, but we've been lucky the past couple of years that hasn't been too much of a problem. So you really have to physically just get in there and do it. Nothing else you can do. So we also deal with other invasives on the property, but this water level increasing this year has been a big help. The best thing to do would be to restore the water level to 1997 levels. That would solve it all. Also get rid of zebra mussels, but that's not going to happen either.
I'm amazed at the amount of land, 400 some acres. What are the restrictions that were passed on when Lawrence took this, as far as, I can't believe there isn't any more development? Is that the way it's going to stay, or is it etched in stone not to put up another?
No restrictions. All that is, it's just, this is the way it is because this is the way Lawrence wants it to be and Lawrence thinks it should be. And so this is how, for the foreseeable future, this is, I don't see anything changing with development or anything like that. In fact, the first year I was here, there was a development of 36 acres that was going to put in 8 condominiums right behind Aaronwood. And we bought that land at a sheriff's sale to stop that from happening. So we've actually protected it from anything else that might happen. There's, Christy, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the people who are here who had family or who had worked here to meet me up at the front table, because the Bailey's Harbor Historic Society is going to work really hard at trying to flesh out the Bailey's Harbor side of the Bjorklunden history and try to get a list of all the names of people who worked here and when and what their jobs were, and just kind of take that route in the history of Bjorklunden. So if you could take a minute before you leave to give us your email or your phone number or your mailing address, we'd like to kind of work to tell that side of the story too, because I think Lawrence has done a fabulous job of carrying on the Boynton story, but we'd like to now bring the rest of the Bailey's Harbor story to it too, because obviously people came here tonight and their families have a great love for this property, so if you just take a minute and talk to me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
And just going off of that, if anybody has any artifacts, photographs, anything like that in your possession that you'd let us scan, or if you want to get, if you're downsizing and want to get rid of stuff, we will take it all. We'll even pick it up. So if you have anything like that in your possession, please don't throw it away. Either get it to Christy, myself, just drop it off here. But we have an archives, and we take that very seriously. So it would be great to have that. So please don't let that go away.
Maxwell and Bray seems to sit in the sort of the middle of this. Was there ever a connection to Maxwell and Bray's, or are they just two separate?
To my knowledge, there was never a connection whatsoever. I think the McCardles, right, and that family had it for years. I mean, up until what, the late '90s.
The Boynton property. That was the old family farm. They
had the yeah. So and there was the 240-acre. There used to be fields in the 70s. There was a lease that the Vales signed with the McCardles, an easement for that road that no longer exists, but they had that as an easement signed from the McCardles. But there's never been anything more than that I know of beyond that. Anything else? I think so. Yes.
Maybe I missed this, but what does Bjorklunden mean?
Okay, who can tell me what Bjorklunden means? Okay, the whole name is, you guys are good at this. So it's Bjorklunden vid Sjön, which is Swedish for Birch Forest by the water. A little bit of controversy on that because everybody thinks that this is like a Norwegian settlement. But when Winifred gave it the name, she was in her Swedish phase. So that's why we have the umlauts over the O. If she had named it like 3 years later, I'm sure it would have been the Norwegian with the slash through it. And people have pressured us to change it. I said, well, if this is the way Winifred wanted it, we're keeping it that way. So we stay with the umlauts and we stick with the Swedish, but obviously there's both Swedish and Norwegian influences on what she did. And in fact, just a last quick aside, these very exciting discoveries that we've made over the years as we go through stuff, these 6 little posters, I'm sure she acquired those when she was in Scandinavia on that trip we talked about with Lillehammer, and those were rolled up in a closet up in the attic of the studio, just in a tube in a big old trunk. And we found those just a few years ago. They're from the early 30s. And so it's just fabulous, the fun things that we've been able to find and put up. So I just want to thank you again for coming tonight. Please don't be strangers. Come back all the time with tons of guests. We love having you here. And please listen to what Christy said, and let's get some more history going here. So thank you, and Jane is there. You have more to say?